Welcome to the Outsmart Burnout podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Zarya Rubin, a functional medicine doctor, an international speaker, and a burnout badass because I've been there myself. After walking away from my own high-stress medical career, I discovered how to break free from burnout to reclaim my passion, purpose, and joy. And now I'm here to help you do the same. From science-backed tips to time-saving hacks, and hopefully some aha moments that just might change your life. So sit back, relax, and let's do this. Welcome to another episode of Outsmart Burnout, the podcast where meaningful health conversations meet real-life transformation. Today, we're honored to welcome Dr. Zarya Vadeboncoeur, the naturopathic physician, creator of the Fatigue Blueprint, and host of the Fatigue Fixer podcast. After working with thousands of exhausted women, Dr. Zarya has crafted a unique approach grounded in functional wellness that uncovers the real drivers of fatigue, from nutritional deficiencies and hormonal fluctuations to chronic stress and burnout, and provides a clear, personalized roadmap to reclaim your energy and vitality. So, if you have ever asked yourself the question, why am I so tired all the time? Or, is this perimenopause, burnout, or something else? You've come to the right place. So welcome, Zarya, Dr. Zarya, to the Outsmart Burnout podcast.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and excited to talk about my favorite thing, which is fatigue and burnout.
Oh my gosh, I know. I am so excited too. When I discovered your website and your Instagram, I was like, okay, this chick is speaking my language.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we have a lot that we can share with our listeners that are going to really appreciate this episode. And it's going to give them some hope, some insight, some answers, some tools in terms of unraveling and figuring out this whole fatigue business. But let's back up a bit and talk a bit about your story, about how you got involved, how you became a naturopathic doctor, and why you decided to focus on fatigue as your area of expertise.
I was always interested in health. So I have this vivid memory of sitting at my grandmother's dining room table when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And my grandmother had gone back to work after having all of her children to become a nurse. And so she had these like old school anatomy books where they were so old that they still had like the fig leaf covering the genitals because God forbid we see anybody's genitals. So I was from a very early age just very interested in health and wellness. And I think like a lot of people who are interested in health thought I would become a medical doctor. And on my first day of my undergrad degree, the dean asked like, who wants to be a doctor? Who wants to go to medical school? And of course, everyone raises their hand. And our class was about 60 people. And he said, just so you know, only 3 or 4 of you are going to make it. That was my first day of university. So a bit of a downer, but I am grateful that it did force me to explore other parts of our healthcare system. And I literally happened by accident upon naturopathic medicine. And I laugh now looking back at how little I knew when I applied. I'm like, I had never seen a naturopathic doctor. I didn't really fully understand what they did, but I was like, that philosophy sounds really good to me. I'm like, take my money. I'll show up for 4 years. And thank goodness I loved it and I love it. And it was the best thing I've ever done. But yeah, it was just all kind of like happenstance and following, I guess, my intuition that I was like, the philosophy really sounds wonderful. And that was enough for me to take the leap. And here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And I think that is really what inspires a lot of people to, discover their true path. And I sort of wish that I had discovered, naturopathy, functional medicine earlier on. I discovered it way later.
Mm-hmm.
And just to clarify for folks who are listening, I know you're based in Canada, which is awesome because I'm Canadian, but what are some of the differences and similarities? Because I know there are so many. People often ask me, well, so are you a naturopath? You're a functional medicine doctor? What's the difference? And so in your words, like, how would you describe the differences or similarities between naturopathy and functional medicine. And then we'll get back to fatigue.
Yeah. I mean, I think, to be honest, naturopathic doctors were like the original functional medicine doctors, right? Like
Right.
a lot of the stuff that is now labeled functional medicine, like these are ideas and concepts and practices that naturopathic doctors have been talking about and practicing for many, many decades. So I think what they have in common is that they're very holistic. We don't want to hear about one problem at a time. We want to hear about everything from head to toe because we know that everything is connected. So it's
Absolutely.
very holistic and it's functional in the sense that we're not trying to slap a band-aid on a problem. Sometimes we need band-aids and there's nothing wrong with using band-aids. But I think what drives a lot of us is looking at the bigger picture and understanding what are some of the underlying factors that are contributing to how this person is feeling, and how can we put things in place that are not just going to help with whatever their current concern is, but that also is going to be preventative and help all parts of their health and their well-being. So I think they're very similar. I think functional medicine is maybe the like newer, shinier version, but that's also accessible to non-naturopathic doctors because we have medical doctors, chiropractors, osteopaths, right? Like we have different professions that can practice functional medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Okay. So back to fatigue. How
Back to
did that
fatigue.
become your area of expertise and
So
focus?
I like hung my shingle and started seeing patients after my many, many years of school. And I was very quickly shocked to learn how many women were tired. So it didn't seem to matter what they came in for. Fatigue was almost always one of their top concerns. And so I started to get really curious about why so many women are tired. And certainly, as a woman who had done lots of school, like I was no stranger to fatigue. So I just got really curious. And I started to just learn more and more and get really interested in the different pieces. And I guess where I've landed at now, and what I love about the work that I get to do and the conversations that we have on the Fatigue Fixer, is that there are very concrete physical reasons why women are tired. And we might get into some of that. Things like thyroid issues, things like burnout, things like nutrient deficiencies, sleep issues. But there's also so much mental, emotional stuff that makes us tired. And that stuff certainly plays into burnout. And I think that was another eye opener, like how much our mental health is such a huge part of our overall health, and how many women either have anxiety or depression or have had anxiety or depression. And now, especially in the last 5 years post-pandemic, how many women have burnout or have had burnout or feel like they're on the verge of burnout. And then all of these things are also happening in a societal context that isn't always healthy for women. So I love to like kind of peel back the layers of the onion, where women usually come see me for a very physical problem. And I love working on the physical stuff. But as we develop a relationship, I love to start to like help them see and understand that mental emotional piece, and also just remind them that we can take the best care of ourselves and have all of the best habits, but we are also trying to thrive in an environment, whether that's the environment in your home, your workplace, or the society at large, that isn't always healthy and isn't always set up for us to thrive. So that's the stuff I love. It's like just looking at the interplay between all these factors and how that impacts how most women feel on a day-to-day basis.
Mm. Yeah, I love all of this. And I would love for you to maybe connect the dots for some people who are listening, because I think that on an intuitive level, we understand, there's stress, there's burnout. It makes us tired, I guess. But how do those pieces connect in terms of the mental, emotional, and the quote unquote stress that we feel? And then how does that translate into actual physical or physiologic issues within the body? I mean, I personally can think of a long list, but I think it'd be really interesting for folks to hear that we sort of try to separate the two, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm stressed. But then we don't realize that all of these other physical symptoms, from whether it's sleep to more complex things like thyroid, adrenal function, nutrition, digestion, all of that, inflammation, maybe shed some light on how physical, like how stress and burnout perhaps manifests in the body.
I mean, the number one thing, which is an obvious thing, but that we sometimes forget in medicine, is that the brain and the body are connected, right? They're not two separate.
Shocking. Yes.
I
Oh
know.
my gosh.
Breaking news.
Breaking
Breaking
news,
news.
folks. Yes.
And what I often say to my patients is that the brain is in charge and the brain is always talking to the body, but also the body is also constantly sending signals and feedback back to the brain.
That was a shocker for me when I learned in my functional medicine training about the afferent efferent communication via the vagus nerve,
Yeah.
and that most of it, the vast majority, is going back up to the brain.
Yes.
And that's, the gut brain connection that we hear about. I did not learn that in medical school. I always thought it was top down. It's fascinating about when you have a gut feeling about something, you might actually legitimately be having a gut feeling. Detour.
Yeah, no, but it's good for people to conceptualize that. So if we start with the idea that like the brain is in charge, your brain's job ultimately is to keep you safe, first and foremost. And so what your brain is constantly doing is it's scanning the environment to basically assess what is the level of threat that's happening and when do I need to jump into action and respond if there's danger. And so your brain is scanning your environment, and that's going to include things including who you spend your time with. It's going to be scanning our screens that we sit in front of way too much. It's going to be having to flag every little ping of an email. And I always notice this when I'm doing a virtual consult and I'll be talking to someone and I can hear their pinging. And I'm just like, number one, drives me crazy. Number two, I'm like, that alone gives me so much insight into your life. The number of pings that come through in our 1 hour or 30 minutes together, like people don't realize your brain, every time there's a ping, it has to say, is that a threat or is it safe? And then if it's safe, like how quickly do I need to respond? Do I need to respond right away or can I wait? Like the amount of scanning that our brain is doing is enormous. And then the brain is also scanning your internal environment. So when you went to bed too late last night and then you didn't eat breakfast because you woke up late and you just had coffee and a granola bar and it's now 1:00 and you haven't peed because you were in a 3-hour meeting.
Sarah, are you describing my life? Are you calling me out here?
I know. Patients are like, how do you know? I'm like, because I hear.
I had breakfast.
Good for you. Like I hear the same stories over and over, which is why I can describe this. So all of those choices all send feedback back to the brain. So the brain might be saying, my God, I have to pee so bad. I'm dehydrated because all I've had is coffee. And my blood sugar, I can tell the blood sugar is starting to drop because I haven't really had enough fuel in my day. So now your brain is taking all of that information and it's again going to have a response to help you survive whatever set of circumstances you have put your brain in on that particular day in that particular moment. And then your brain, based on all of this data, is going to create stress reactions. And I think one of the things that I find fascinating with women is that most of us are under enormous amounts of stress, but we are so mentally tough and resilient that we don't even realize we're under stress because our brain, mentally, we do all kinds of mental gymnastics to convince ourselves that like, it's okay, I'm fine. I'm a bit busy, but like it's under control, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, our bodies are screaming at us. So your brain has decided there's a threat, a stress, creates a cascade of reactions in your body, the end of which is the production of cortisol, which everyone is very interested in right now. So cortisol is a stress hormone. It does lots of different things. But the way that stress shows up for women often is not in our heads. Like I think we're expecting to feel it mentally. The way that I see it show up is we can't sleep. We have a hard time shutting our brain down and we're just wired at night, even though we're exhausted. Our brain is still, the hamster is still going. Or maybe you're so exhausted that you fall asleep, but you wake up to pee and it's game over. Now you can't get back to sleep. Maybe you're like me and you like to wear your shoulders like earrings because you have so much muscle tension and you're getting headaches or pain. How many women have IBS? The more we learn about IBS, the more we learn it's the gut is just trying to function in a state of high stress, and the brain and the gut are misfiring and causing all kinds of GI issues. Maybe it's raging PMS because your brain is already managing so much stuff that when your hormones drop every month, your brain can't handle that. Maybe it's showing up as like impatience and irritability and anger, that you're so emotionally and mentally drained that it takes nothing to set you off. So it shows up in so many ways. Those would be a few examples that I think a lot of our listeners can probably relate to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that when we talk about sleep and stress, that's kind of one of the first places that I look to help folks, because if you're not sleeping,
Yeah.
you really can't, you don't have a foundation for helping and fixing anything else. And if you're tired, if you're fatigued, people say, "Oh, I sleep great." And then I ask them, "Well, but so how many hours?" Like 3 or 4. So you have to dig a little deeper. But so in terms of how stress interrupts sleep, well, we know that there is that can't shut the brain off function, which is like the ruminating and the reliving. And that's kind of maybe a little bit more anxiety brain or amygdala overfunctioning. But then when we talk about cortisol, I think that what folks don't really know or understand is that cortisol has this unique pattern, and that it has a partner hormone that is melatonin.
That's right.
And melatonin, you guys might know, is the sleep hormone, because we all know, "Oh, I can't sleep. Maybe I should take melatonin." Well, maybe if your cortisol's too high, then your melatonin is not going to be able to work, and they act in opposition of each other. And if your cortisol's super high at night, but it's super low in the morning, well, then you can't get out of bed.
Yeah.
So I think that that is something that folks often don't know how to connect those dots of, all of this stress could actually be messing with my sleep in mental ways and in physiologic ways. So I love these different ideas that we're giving people.
The other thing I always remind my patients is that, again, going back to the brain, your brain's job is to keep you safe. And sleep is historically the time when we are most at risk of attack.
In danger.
In danger. So if there is something happening internally or externally where your brain does not feel safe, it will not let you get into a deep sleep because it doesn't feel safe enough. And I always laugh because so many of my patients, I ask like very specific questions, as I'm sure you do, right? Like, what are you doing between dinner and bedtime? Like, I'm watching TV, then I get into bed, scrolling. But my favorite of all are the people who listen to literally like murder
podcast.
Yes, right before bed. And I'm
or
like,
they watch murder shows and stuff.
100%.
And my husband doesn't understand why I say, like, I have a veto on certain shows and things at night. And I say, I just can't watch it. And he says, but it's just a show. And I try to explain to him that for most people, perhaps not my husband, that the brain doesn't necessarily differentiate between an actual saber-toothed tiger and one on TV.
That's correct.
Or what I also tell my patients is it doesn't differentiate between an actual person chasing you with a club or an axe in cave times and somebody making nasty comments to you on Facebook.
That's right. Yeah.
Your brain doesn't differentiate between those threats.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of encouraging women to think about their bedtime routine from a place of like, what's going to help my brain feel safe? Probably not watching murder or listening to murder, not having a screen where everyone on the internet is angry at everybody else. And it's literally like, people criticizing and being mean to each other online. The other thing is that when we're stressed, it impacts our behaviors. So when you're stressed, maybe you're snacking more in the evening. Maybe you're more likely to have a glass of wine. Maybe you're more likely to delay bedtime because you're scrolling because you just need something to help you unwind. So it's not just that cortisol and stress impact your hormones and your melatonin. They absolutely do, but they also have massive impacts on our behaviors. And those behaviors are also going to influence whether or not you have a good sleep.
Absolutely. I mean, let's talk about the alcohol
Oh
paradox for a
boy.
moment. That
Yes.
people typically are stressed, they want to unwind, they want to relax. Maybe if I just have a glass of wine or two or three, I'll feel better. And then these women are in perimenopause. And then what happens then with the alcohol and the hormones and the stress and the sleep? I mean, it's a perfect storm, right?
It's a disaster. Yeah. And this is a conversation I have a lot because I think a lot of women don't want to hear this. And I get it. I used to be an avid wine and gin and tonic drink. Like
Same.
same. I loved having a drink. And then finally, it's been about a year and a half that I haven't consumed any alcohol because I literally one night I had a glass of rosé with some girlfriends and I woke up that night in a night sweat with heart palpitations. And I was just like, this is not worth it for me anymore.
Yeah.
And so we need to understand that alcohol is a sleep disruptor. You will probably fall asleep okay because it's a sedative. So you will feel sleepy and relaxed, but it is a vasodilator. So you are more likely to overheat, especially if you're in perimenopause. But even if you're not, it is also going to cause more micro awakenings, which often are so short that you don't realize they're happening, but you wake up the next day and you're not rested because you did not get good quality sleep. And alcohol can also really disrupt REM sleep, which is dream sleep. And dream sleep is actually like emotional first aid. Dream sleep is how we metabolize a lot of our life's events and the things that have happened to us. And so if you're cutting into that, you are absolutely going to disrupt your sleep. So I think we need to have like an honest conversation. And it doesn't mean you can't drink. I'm not saying everyone needs to stop drinking, but I think we need to be very mindful, especially if one of your goals is to have more energy. And especially if you're not sleeping well, we need to be very like real about what alcohol is doing to our sleep because it's not helping.
100%. I mean, yeah, I cut it out for a long time. Personally, I've slowly brought it back in
Mm-hmm.
here and there. If I just have one drink,
Yeah.
it's usually something low alcohol content. I don't drink really hard alcohol anymore. And even wine, I find is too much. So I'll have maybe a cider or something
Yeah.
like that. And then I mostly drink non alcoholic. There's all these great products out now, which
Mm-hmm.
is wonderful because I think society is recognizing, guess what? Alcohol is a drug, it is a toxin. It requires metabolism in your system. And if your system is already overtaxed by all kinds of other things, stress, hormonal fluctuations, you're adding just one more thing that can be the kind of the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah. And I think just on the sleep part, I think most women don't realize that maybe they do realize, but in perimenopause, I always say the threshold to wake you up becomes very small, right? If you look like I have a 9-year-old boy, like I can go into his room, I can turn the light on, I can kiss him. He's not waking up. A perimenopausal woman, someone breathes too loud beside her and she's awake. So we want to make sure that we are not intentionally doing more things that make us more likely to wake up, including eating too late at night or eating very irregularly during the day. Both of those things can disrupt your sleep. Having alcohol, right? Scrolling and watching stressful things before bed. So I'm a big fan, again, like anything that makes your brain feel safe is going to increase that threshold so that you're less likely to wake up. And that if you do wake up, your brain is not in such a state that it's going to start trying to solve all the world's problems. And then you're awake and you can't get back to sleep because I think
Yeah.
nothing is more annoying than being awake at 3 a.m.
Percent. For our listeners who are maybe struggling with sleep right
Mm-hmm.
now, what is your go to? Like, what do you recommend for folks when they come to you and they're struggling with sleep?
Yeah, it really depends. So, if people are having trouble falling asleep, the first thing I do is I look at their sleep timing. A lot of people are actually timing sleep improperly, which is a huge issue. So,
Mm.
some simple math, whatever time you wake up at, your ideal bedtime is going to be 14 to 16 hours later. So, to give you an example, if you get up at 6 a.m., your ideal bedtime is somewhere between 8 and 10. If you go to
Wow.
bed past that, if you are up for more than 16 hours, going back to the brain, humans are the only animal on Earth that will delay bedtime on purpose for no good reason. The only reason an animal would delay bedtime is if they are unsafe or they do not have enough food and they need to stay awake to like find more nuts to stash away. So when you delay your bedtime, when you have been up past 16 hours, your brain starts to say, why are we still awake? Is there something that is making it not okay for us to go to bed? So again, it'll scan the environment, and hopefully you live in a place where you are physically safe. And then it will go internally and it will activate our anxious amygdala, brain that just looks for all kinds of things to worry about. And so a lot of times people get this second wind, right? Like how many women are like falling asleep on the couch at 8 or 9, and then they like get up, start getting ready, finish cleaning and tidying, and they get a second wind, and now they can't fall asleep till 11:30 or 12.
100%. I think for a lot of us, a lot of women, a lot of moms in
Mm-hmm.
general, it's like we procrastinate sleeping because we're trying to get any of that alone time or me time, because you're busy all day, you're with kids, and then finally, you're making dinner, this, that, the other thing. Finally, the kids go to bed, and
Yeah.
my kid has never been an early sleeper. And then by the time that they're in bed, it's like, oh, it's already 10 o'clock. But now my day can start. Now I can start focusing on myself. Yeah. And it's too late.
It's too late. And this goes back to the societal issue. If the only time you have for yourself starts after your kids go to bed, that's the problem.
100%.
That is inherently a huge problem. You are never going to have enough time to unwind and relax and take care of yourself if the only time you set aside for that happens after your children go to bed.
That's the golden nugget right there.
It is. Like, we have to change that. That is unacceptable that the only time we have for ourselves happens after 9 or whatever time your children go to bed. It's never going to cut it. So again, if you're having trouble falling asleep, ideally you don't want to be awake for more than 16 hours. So what that means is you want to be in your bed for about 8 hours so that you're getting at least 7 hours of sleep. If you are timing your bedtime right and you're still having trouble falling asleep, I look at what's happening mentally, because for a lot of people, their bodies are tired, but their brains are still going. And that goes back to all the stuff we talked about with like, don't do stressful things in the evening because your brain will have a hard time unwinding. If you're falling asleep, no problem, but you're struggling to sleep through the night, there's usually 3 things that I see interfering with that. One is stress. So if you have high cortisol, especially in the middle of the night, you're going to wake up much more easily and go into your overthinking brain. The second one actually has to do with blood sugar. So if you are a hot mess with your meals during the day, and again, you skipped breakfast, you had like carrots and hummus for lunch, which is not lunch for a grown woman, and then you ate a whole bunch of dinner and maybe had some snacks in the evening, if your blood sugar is not well regulated in the day, it doesn't magically regulate itself overnight. And when you are sleeping, your brain is doing a bunch of cleanup. Your brain is actually quite active when you're sleeping. And in order to do all the things you want your brain to do, you need a steady stream of glucose or sugar. If you have eaten and been, again, a hot mess with your meals, and you start to drop into low blood sugar overnight, your brain freaks out because it needs glucose. It triggers a stress response because low blood sugar is a big stress. You get a nice big surge of cortisol in the middle of the night, and that is very likely to wake you up. So your meal timing isn't just about like, yes, breakfast is good for you. It is creating healthy metabolic and blood sugar function during the day that has a huge impact at night. And then the third thing that is likely to wake people up, especially women, is hormonal changes. And that's often one of the first things we see. Even before women start to have big menstrual changes with perimenopause, we often see that they're having disrupted sleep. So those are the 3 things that I will kind of ask questions about and screen for. The last thing I'll say is that we do a terrible job of screening women and diagnosing them with sleep apnea. So especially in perimenopause, there's a huge increased risk of having sleep apnea. Women are just as likely to have sleep apnea as men. And it doesn't always show up. You might not have the big belly and be snoring and like choking or gasping. You might have insomnia. You might have a morning headache and feel exhausted. And if you're waking up to pee more than twice in a night, that could be a sign that you have sleep apnea, which a lot of women, another reason why women don't sleep well is we're waking up to pee multiple times. So those are some of the things that I'm always screening for and chatting with my patients about if they're not sleeping.
Fantastic. I love it.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about some of the things that you offer in terms of the fatigue blueprint and how that came about and some of the tools that people can find on your website.
Yeah. So there's lots of different ways I work with people. The number one way being kind of one-on-one in my practice, where I serve patients all over Ontario, and I can serve some in the Outaouais region as well. But if they live outside of that, I have a few different like ways that they can work with me. The free way is my podcast, The Fatigue Fixer, where I have a lot of conversations like this one. So if you're enjoying this conversation, there's lots more. I also have the iron deficiency fix. The number one thing that I see when I run labs on women, which I do on all my patients, is iron deficiency.
Really?
Iron deficiency is the number one nutrient deficiency worldwide, and women are at very high risk for iron deficiency, especially in the perimenopause transition, because often we are having heavier periods and often more frequent periods. So that is a course, like an online course that helps you, guides you basically through my 3-step process that I guide my patients through for people who have low iron. And then I also have my 40 and fatigue program, which is basically helping women understand what the heck is perimenopause, because even though we're talking so much about it, there's still so much confusion about what it is and when it starts and how to know if you're in it. I just had a patient yesterday who was like, my doctor tested my hormones and told me I'm not in perimenopause. And I had to be like, for once again, that's not how we diagnose perimenopause.
This is what I keep seeing as well. It's like people say,
No,
I checked my hormones this one day and this one time.
I know.
So let's dig into that a little bit, because I
Sure.
feel like perimenopause is this elephant in the room that suddenly everybody's talking about, which
Yeah.
is a good thing.
Yes.
And I don't think people are necessarily connecting all the dots. They're thinking, oh, well, but my periods are still regular, or, well, that can't really be the reason why I'm so tired or burnt out. But I think that there's just so much interconnection there. So talk to us a little bit more about what the heck is going on
Yeah.
in perimenopause, why we're so tired, why
Yeah.
it's causing all these disruptions, and what women can do about it.
Yeah. So let's start with what perimenopause is. So perimenopause is the 4 to 10 year stretch before your period goes away. So menopause is technically one day. It is the day where you have not had a period for a year. You can throw out your tampons and throw a party. You're done. Everything after that one day is post-menopause. So for the rest of your life after that, you're going to be considered post-menopause. And on average in Canada and the US, menopause happens around age 51 or 52, but it can happen anytime between 45 and 55. So again, somewhere between 45 and 55. For most women in our early 50s, our periods are going to end. Perimenopause is the 4 to 10 years before that. What's happening in perimenopause is that you're starting to run out of viable eggs because you were born with all of your eggs. They have been with you your whole life. And I always joke they were with you in university when you were maybe making some not so great decisions with alcohol and other things. And so we eventually run out of viable, good quality eggs. And as we start to run out of eggs, you're going to have months where you don't ovulate. Or if you do ovulate, you're not making the same level of hormone that you did when you were ovulating when you were 20 or 30. And so one of the first things that happens is that we start to see some decline of hormones as we start to run out of viable eggs. And a lot of these things can happen in a stage which is called late reproductive. I know these are terrible names, but this is just what we name things for women. We give them bad names. So late reproductive is there are hormonal changes happening, but they are not sufficient that your period is yet changed. You might notice that your flow has changed. So maybe you used to bleed for 6 days and now you're only bleeding for 4 days. And some women will start to have symptoms in that late reproductive. Some women have night sweats. A lot of women start to have sleep disruption, and a lot of women start to notice mood changes. And part of what's happening in those very early perimenopause or late reproductive is that your brain is, again, always the brain, your brain is trying to function as hormones are changing. And those hormones impact all different parts of your brain. So a lot of the early symptoms that we see with perimenopause are neurological type symptoms, their mood issues, their night sweats, their sleep disturbances. Right now, the official criteria that says 100% you are in perimenopause is that your cycle, meaning how often your period comes, is changing by at least 7 days in either direction. Meaning, if you were a classic 28-day cycle kind of girl, and now all of a sudden you had a few periods that were 21 days or 35 days, that is your official entry into perimenopause. That early perimenopause is, again, where you're seeing those cycle changes, but you're still having periods. They're just not showing up as consistently. And that can last several years. And then eventually you will move into what we call late perimenopause. This is where you're going at least 2 months between your periods. And usually at that point, it means that your final period is going to happen somewhere in the next 1 to 3 years. And some women have symptoms early and the whole time. Some women get symptoms only later. One of the things I think is really important is that we are having more awareness of perimenopause, which I think is great. The flip side, the problem I see is we are now blaming everything on perimenopause. And we forget that there are other things happening while we go through perimenopause, including iron deficiency, including burnout, including having huge caregiving needs. Yes, it's great that we're aware of perimenopause. Perimenopause can cause a lot of symptoms, and we need to make sure that we're not blaming and assuming that everything is perimenopause without looking at some of these other things that are also just as common and can cause fatigue.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that that is such an important message. It's like, yes, we have to raise awareness. Yes, you have to think about it. And we have to think about all these other things that you mentioned, the nutritional aspects, the hormonal imbalances, including thyroid,
Yes,
which is a huge one. I mean, yeah, it's wow. Yeah, this is definitely a lot for me. It's so interesting because I don't have the classic symptoms. I think we think, oh, it's the night sweats and hot flashes. For me, it was really the brain fog. Like my brain literally stopped working.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I can't function like this. I joke that it was like someone took my brain and took it out and put it in a blender and then put it back in.
Yeah, and that's very common. And so when we look at like why women are tired in perimenopause, again, some of it is the brain just trying to function in a different state. But it goes back to what we said earlier. When you don't feel good, when you have brain fog and you're tired and you didn't sleep well, it also impacts your behaviors. We know that women going through menopause on average take at least 3,000 fewer steps a day. So we become less active. We often are going to reach for more calorie dense, highly palatable foods because, again, we're tired. We don't want to go to the grocery store and make an elaborate meal. We want something quick and easy that takes not a ton of effort. So a lot of this is physiological. It's all the changes that are happening in the body. And it's also that compounded with our behaviors that happen because we're human, right? Like, when you're tired, you are going to behave differently, even though it's subtle. And women always come in, they're like, nothing's changed and I feel like crap. And I'm like, that's possible. But also sometimes these things are subtle. Like the thing I always say is like 5 years ago, very few of us worked from home. And we don't realize that working from home, and I know this because I wear a Fitbit and I track my steps, if you do not leave your house and you go for at least a 30 to 45-minute walk, you are sedentary. Like point blank, end of story. So we all say nothing's changed, but a lot of times these things are very gradual. They happen over time. We don't realize, but you do them over years and years, and they add up to fatigue. They add up to weight gain. They add up to brain fog. So we need to be like, this is where I think working with a practitioner who has the time to ask a lot of specific questions is so helpful because we can really start to tease out what are the areas where we're not supporting energy and supporting health, where we can start to focus on better habits in those areas.
As we sort of wrap up this conversation, I feel like I could talk to you for another 2 hours. Are there any burnout or fatigue related myths that you want to bust today for our listeners?
A big burnout one is that if you're still going to work, you're not burnt out. Like if you're still capable of going to work, So when we look at burnout, and you may have covered this before, but just briefly, when we look at burnout, there's three things that we often see. One is fatigue and exhaustion. Number two is often a more cynicism and negative look at work. Like we often like, what's the point of this? Why am I doing this? Everything's so annoying. And then the third part is reduced professional efficacy. And I don't know about you, Dr. Zarya, but a lot of the women that I work with are high performers. So they're
Exactly.
exhausted, they're annoyed as shit, but you better believe they're still performing.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, you just described my life in the past.
Yeah.
And, even if I'm phoning it in at work, I may still be working at a high level.
That's right. So I think we need to really help women understand that burnout doesn't look like you can't get out of bed and you can't go to work. It is so incredibly common, and we need to do a better job screening for, because again, all of these things are happening at the same time and they can all look very similar. That's why it's important to work with someone who's going to be like, is this iron deficiency? Is this burnout? Is it perimenopause? Is it a combination of these things? But I feel like women, we're so good at pushing and continuing that we often don't realize it's burnout until we are burnt to a crisp and we are forced because we literally can no longer function. And I think we need to think and treat burnout much sooner than that, because the further burnt out you are, the longer the recovery is going to be. And a lot of times there is so much resistance to what actually needs to change in order to fix burnout. We think I'll just take 2 weeks off work and then I'm going to like rest. And like, I have a few patients who are like, it took them 4 months of being off
At
work
least.
to chill out enough to finally acknowledge the way that they were thinking about and their connection to productivity and work. Like, it can take a long time to really untangle how what we were taught about rest, what we were taught about work, and like, this shit runs deep. We're not going to fix it with like 2 weeks away from work.
No. I tell
So
people,
yeah,
how long did it take you to get here? That's
100%.
probably how long it's going to take to undo it and to recover and to develop a different mindset
Yes.
about, what we've normalized
Yeah.
and what we have told ourselves that we cannot change.
Mm-hmm.
I always say, there's a way. You just have to rethink it and reimagine it. And sometimes it feels impossible. But what's really impossible is continuing the way you have been and expecting there not to be serious physical and mental health consequences.
Yeah. And I think that's the hardest part for women, is they have been able to function at such a high level, and it feels like, I think it's like it's a grief for them when they cannot continue to function.
Yes.
But I think it's such an opportunity to reimagine and revisit our relationship with productivity and rest, and decide, like, what do I want this to look like moving forward? Because for a lot of women, perimenopause is a wake-up call. Like, I can't keep skipping breakfast and not exercising and drinking wine. Like, you just can't.
What you've gotten away with in your 20s and 30s,
no,
you can't get away with it anymore.
No,
It's a wake-up call.
Agreed.
It's a true,
Yeah.
the midlife unraveling, as Brene Brown calls it, but it can also be a really positive thing, because if you
100%.
want to make changes that are going to impact your health and longevity long-term, now's the time to make it. So on that note, how can folks get in touch with you and head over to your website, get all the goodies that you have there? I know I went over there and there was a quiz, there was all kinds of things. There's fatigue blueprints, etc. So tell us how folks can get in touch.
Yeah. So you can either come and find me on Instagram at Sarah Vadeboncoeur, which I'm sure we will link to, or you can head over to my website, Dr. Sarah with an H, the letter V.ca. And yeah, you can learn about all of my services and different programs. You can take my quiz. There's lots of free resources on there just to help you get a better understanding of what's making you tired.
I love it. This conversation has definitely been one of the most impactful that we have ever had on this show. So if you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, rate this show, and share this episode with a woman in your life that you know who is exhausted and wants to figure out why, and it is desperately seeking more energy and doesn't want to find that through more cups of coffee. Until next time, remember that burnout is not your destiny, it's your wake-up call.